I don't know, probably some of you may have come from Dubai Church, but the first time I went to Dubai, I was part of the program that was preaching that Sabbath morning. Because they knew I was a Brazilian, they managed to find a football, soccer ball. And then as I was welcome in the church, there was a football there. And then I said, they have no idea. They try to please me, because as a Brazilian, they think about football and Pelé and this kind of thing. But little they knew that I had no ability with the ball.
Football.
But the ball was there. The ball was there. But the worst part came later because somebody threw the ball to me, and I had to do something about it. I just threw it back. So that was my experience with Dubai Church. So greetings to Fujairah RAK SDA. Thank you very much for Pastor Dilip. And I have great pleasure in pronouncing that on the mouthful, saying Pastor Dilip and his wife Cara and the kids. I remember when we first met, I used to call him Brother Dilip. Now he's Pastor Dilip. Things change. It is a great pleasure and a great honor and a great responsibility for me because we have some part of this decision of them to engage in ministry. It's a hard work, but a blessed work as well. Another thing I have to mention before coming to my sermon, you showed this video about tithes and offering, and this is precisely the one that we have for today in Brazil. I'm going to show that to you. This is going to be in Portuguese. Only Pastor Brother Albert Azevedo, who is from Goa, is supposed to speak Portuguese, is going to be able to understand. But I'm going to play it for you.
Em uma cidade remota na Índia, médico recém-treinado chamado Prem optou por viver com uma baixa remuneração, sendo pioneiro.
All right, that's enough for today. So you see, this is a world church. So the things you see there on Sabbath day, the very same Sabbath you're seeing here, and enjoying the same message from God as it happens throughout the world. I could check some names here, and I just came to the realization that we have no Filipino people, no Indian people there. Am I right? There are no Filipino people, no Jamaican people, no Indian people in Fujairah and RAK SDA, but I could get some names. Fitzgerald Edwards, Anne Almonsin, James Willock, Jane, Kesden Batuhan. I don't know if Batuhan is the proper pronunciation. Stephanie Acosta. Sounds like Filipino, right? Sounds like Filipino names.
Yes.
And I could see that we had Brother Albert Azevedo, who is my father from the time I started. I began my work with the Doha Church. We have Brother Reginaldo from Brazil, still connected with us via Zoom. We have Brother Macintosh and Sister Barbara. I've never met these people. Who are these people? Are you all right? Good to see you. I believe Brother Flace Benjamin is online as well. Sister Manjula, I remember them very well. I'm not sure about Chuck Hagan and Victoria and Faith and Dewey Pinidi, but sort of I thought they were online. If not, anyway, my greetings go to these people on behalf of all those others who are online for these Sabbath morning worship. Again, I would like to give my thanks to the leaders, the local leaders from both churches, Fujairah and RAK SDA, for accepting my this time together, myself and you in this Sabbath worship. It has been read before and pretty well read, but I'm going to do it again, if you allow me. We're going to read from the Gospel of John, chapter 9, verses 1 to 7. Only I'm going to skip verse 4, but I'm going to concentrate on some aspects of this message. There are some gems the spiritual gems that God has left in this pericope of the scriptures. Let's read it again. I invite you all to read John chapter 9, verses 1 and 7. It goes, now as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. So from the very beginning of the narrative, we see something which is absolutely impossible to be sorted out. The man was blind from birth. So he had no idea what's the world around, no idea of the color of the flowers and the color of people and the color of nature, probably only the forms and the shapes he could touch because he was blind from birth. And verse 2 says, and his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus, verse 3, Jesus answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. Verse 5 says, as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Very, very important expression from this pericope. And verse 5 goes, when he had said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And he said to him, go, wash in the pool of Siloam, which is translated sand. So the man went and washed and came back seeing. Beautiful story, but it brings a couple of problems that we have to try and sort out in a few minutes, if ever it's possible to be sorted out in a few minutes. This quote from the scriptures brings along several second thoughts, just to name a few. Number one, very unfortunate question, the question that is found in verse 2. It says, and his disciple asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Probably to today's ears, this question sounds totally nonsense. You know, how come you can think that if somebody, they believed in two things, two possible things. Huh? In those days, they used to take their time discussing this. Option number one, because the parents had committed sin, God rewarded their sinning by making his son to be born blind. So it was like a penalty coming from the hands of God. That was the first idea, and believe me, they use it to think that way. And there is a second one, which for me is much worse than the first one. The second one says, because God knew that the baby, before being born, was to follow a sinful life. So God was sort of advancing things, giving to this baby the penalty of being born blind, because throughout life he would be a sinful person. So God had to give this penalty to this baby even before he had done something, done anything. So he was born blind because he was supposed, God knew beforehand that this man was to follow a sinful life. That's the kind of thing they used to discuss those days. And that's the reason why the disciples who were influenced by this type of idea, they asked, Rabbi, who committed sin? This man or his parents, that he was born blind? And you see from the text that Jesus never stops to give an explanation to these type of questions, because it's really nonsense. Verse 2, what does this Jesus really mean when he affirms, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the words of God should be revealed in him? This is a very hard theological problem, because quite a lot of discussion surrounds this expression, because some people say, so God is not a good God. Because actually, analysis say that probably this man who was born blind, he was on his 30 to 40 years of age. So from what Jesus replied here to the disciples, it's possible that somebody can understand that God could have done something before to release these men from captivity, the captivity of blindness. But God never did this. He was waiting for nearly 40 years for something special to happen, made by the hands of Jesus, only so that God should be glorified. So what a bad God is this one, right? So he makes somebody suffer for 40 years, that only for his name to be glorified. So this is a very big theological problem. This is very much discussed, among theologians throughout the world. And there is a third point I'd like to mention here is the spittle clay peck issue. I do not want actually to go into much deeper into this one, but it's like it really doesn't sound very interesting, and a bit difficult to understand. Jesus could have healed that man with his words, but instead he spits on the floor, he makes flags with his hand, and then he applies that mud thing on the eyes and says, "Go to the well of Siloam, and then do whatever you have to do there. You're going to be able to see." I mean, it sounds strange. God could have said, "Okay, all right. So you want to see. So because of your faith, you can see from now on." Simple as that. As he had done before, but he's actually makes this mud out of spit, and this speck is put on, is placed on the eyes of the man born blind. So these are some of the problems. I'm not going to be able to address all of them, but a few of them, which are very inspiring, which have to do with our spiritual life and encouragement. But I'm going to give you a little bit of the background. This John chapter 9 actually is a continuation of John chapter 8. And the context here is that they were doing the services of the Feast of the Tabernacles. Ellen White says that on the Desire of Ages, page 463. So Jesus was in the court the previous day. Jesus was in the court of the temple when he pronounced the following words. He said, "I am the light of the world." And Ellen White, as she makes her comments on this, she says, "In the center of the court rose two lofty standards, supporting lampstands of great size. After the evening sacrifice, all the lamps were kindled, shedding their light over Jerusalem." So Jesus took advantage of this, and then he said, "I am the light of the world." The Desire of Ages again says it was morning. The sun had just risen above the Mount of Olives, and its rays fell a dazzling brightness on the marble palaces and lighted up the gold of the temple walls. Jesus actually made sure everybody was around him to hear the words he was about to say. And in John chapter 8, verse 12, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. I am the light of the world. Okay, so let's go to some of the lessons we can take out of many from this text, from these scriptures of John chapter 9. Number one comes with a question. Do you really always know who you are dealing with? Do you really know who you're talking to? To some extent, when the Jewish authorities replied to Jesus very harshly, they had a point. They had a point. These people were very highly educated people. So they were doctors of the law. They were familiar to universal literature. So they could speak several languages, among of the most widely spread ones in the world of those days. So they were used to being the ones everyone would turn to when they wanted to seek for the truth. They had probably traveled throughout the world. They had probably been to Rome, the seat of the ruling empire. They had been to several other countries, maybe into the United Arab Emirates, maybe into Fujairah, to Ras Al Khaimah, to Dubai, Abu Dhabi, maybe to Doha, to Kuwait, Bahrain. Probably they had been to the Burj Khalifa and had been hosted in the Burj Al Arab Hotel. I don't know. So these were very important people, actually. So they knew the world. They had traveled throughout the world, the most important places of the world in those days. So they were VIP, very important people. And now, trying to confront them comes this nobody. Jesus was to them a nobody. Jesus comes to them and says, I am the light of the world. They might have left, what do you mean world? You've never left your country. You've never left your city. How come you say you are the light, number one? Now, how come you say you are the light of the world? You don't know the world. So this common person dressed like, not dressed like the nobility of the elite, just came to the doctors in Israel, and they say, I am the light of the world. And they ask it, which world? Have you been to London? Have you been to Tokyo? Have you been to New York? Have you been to Milan? Have you been to Paris? Have you been to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil? Jesus would probably say, no, I've never been to these places. So how come you are the light of the world? You know nothing what they're talking about. How come you are the light of the world? The world is much bigger than Nazareth. The world is much bigger than your country. You've never left your country. And now you come and say, you are the light of the world. Do you really know who we're talking to? These Jewish leaders, they were talking to somebody who was actually the light of the world and the whole universe. And they had no idea they were dealing with. Jewish authorities, not even the disciples themselves, had the slightest idea who they were dealing with. John chapter 1, verses 1 to 5, from there we read, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and he was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. And verse 4 says, in him was life, and the life was the light of men. Verse 5 says, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. This is John chapter 1 from verses 1 to 5. Do you know who you are dealing with? Do I know the infinite ranking Jesus holds in the economy of the universe? Do you really understand that when we raise our voices in prayer, we are reaching the most powerful being ever, the Lord Almighty? Sometimes we forget that. Sometimes we forget that we are not dealing with somebody, with a common person. He is the light of the world. He's the light of the universe. He's the all-powerful one. He's the Almighty God. That's the one we've been praising in this worship service. This is the one we've been talking to as we elevate our words in prayer. So my question is, how much do you know about the one we're dealing with? How much do I know about the one I am talking to on a daily basis? We're talking to the most powerful being in the whole of the universe. And this is a blessing. This is a blessing. Sometimes it's difficult to talk, most of the time, it is totally difficult to have contact with the greatest authorities on earth. But you have free access to the greatest authority in the whole of the universe, God himself. That's the one we are dealing with. Second point I'd like to emphasize here is the Jesus' possible impossible equation. In John, again quoting from John chapters 5 to 7, so as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with his saliva, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And he said to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam." So he went and washed and came back seeing. So number one, there are some quotes from classic writings throughout history that says that some people or some gods are able to heal other people or human beings actually by using saliva made out of their own spit. Yes, it is in the classic writing. And the Talmud actually says something. The effect, it says in Baba Batra 12b, it says, the effect that the saliva of the firstborn of a father has healing properties, but not the saliva of the firstborn of a mother. So Jesus was not the firstborn of a father. Jesus was the firstborn of a mother. So according to tradition, Jesus' saliva made in clay was not actually able to do anything, miraculously speaking, because tradition would say it had to be the saliva from somebody who was the firstborn of a father, which was not the case of Jesus. But whatever is they believed in their culture, Jesus does the extraordinary. Jesus, the one who was not the firstborn of a father, he was the firstborn of a mother, he's the one who does the miracle. He does the impossible. Jesus is the one who is expert in doing the impossible. No matter what different cultures are able to say, no matter what we have believed before, but the Bible says Jesus is the one anointed and appointed by God, and he's able to do the impossible. I know that all of us who have been experiencing difficult things in our lives, I'm sure about it. And there are times in our lives in which we totally depend on impossible action from the part of God. Human being is not able to do any further. And that's the time when God enters the scene and does his miracle in favor of his people. Now, third and last gem from this John chapter 9 is the funny thing of using clay and saliva pack and place it on the eyes of the born blind man. Number one, as I probably have told you before, this practice was used, there is a registry that was used before in the classical writings out of the Bible. And some other people would say, anthropologists and historians would say that gods were told to be able to do that. But the reason why, the great question here is, why did Jesus use this kind of expedient to make clay with his saliva and to put that pack, to place that pack on the eyes of the born blind man? There is a theologian, very respected one, called King. He wrote the book, The Gospel of John, a commentary. And from his page 781, I read, "But far more importantly, by making clay of the spittle and applying it to the eyes of the blind from birth, Jesus may be recalling the creativity act of Genesis 2:7. So our understanding is Jesus decided to use clay, spitting on the floor, making that little mud, applying that pack to the eyes of the born blind man, because Jesus was actually going back to the narrative of the creation of the world in Genesis chapter 1. And I'm going to quote from Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 to 3. It says from there, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. You remember that Adam was created out of mud, out of clay. And again, from Genesis 1 to 3. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And verse 3 says, then God said, let there be light, and there was light. To Jesus, he was giving light to the eyes of that man for the very first time in his life, because he was born blind. It was not the case like somebody who was born with a perfect vision, and for some reason he got some kind of a disease, whatever, infirmity, and then he became blind later. So he could, for some time understand the colors of everything in nature. That's not the case here. The case here is about a man who was born blind. He had no idea what light was, what the color of things was. And Jesus actually, when he spits on the floor and uses the mud with that peck on the eyes of the blind man, he was actually invoking the narrative of creation, because Jesus was saying, it was like he was saying, I am making creation again. I am recreating man as I perform this miracle. So John chapter 9, verse 35 says, Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of God? Verse 36 says, he answered and said, who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him? Verse 37, and Jesus said to him, you have both in him, and it is he who is talking to you. Then he said, Lord, I believe, and worshipped him. The closing of the narrative of the miracle of the return of the vision of the born blind man was that the born blind man decided to worship God from now on. That's in verse 38. He said, Lord, I believe, and worshipped him. That's what the blind man said. Worship him. Actually, it's very important to join in theology this topic of worshiping God. That's probably the reason why the narrative of the miracle of the blind man, of Jesus with the blind man, closes with the idea of worshiping. For the first, it fits actually a joining portrait of Jesus' deity and invites John's own audience to worship Jesus. All of those things are supposed to give us a final message. God is the only one who deserves to be worshipped. God is the only one who deserves to be adored, because he's the mighty one. He's the mighty God. He's the one who can do what to us is totally impossible. He's the only one to be able, the only one able to do what seems to us that there is no answer to. Maybe somebody is facing some different kinds of problems in their lives, financial problems, health problems, family relationship problems, you name it. And maybe you have come to some point in your life when you think, I have no more hope. It's not possible to have that thing sorted out. But I ask you again, as I put as a question when we first began this message, do you know who you are dealing with? He is the one who says, I am the light of the world. I am the one who can do the impossible. Now, as I close this message, I would like to appeal to the heart of every one of you, to my own heart. that we earnestly acknowledge God as the all-powerful God, the Almighty God, the one with whom we have a relationship on a daily basis is the powerful God that can do anything and everything, possible or according to humans, impossible, just to save us, just to rescue us. And He's done. I know that you have your own experience with that. I have my own experience with that, experience in that. Things that were considered totally impossible, but I put those things in the hands of God, and He made His miracle. Right now, I'm facing it. We're having a very serious problem in my family right now. My wife is not very well in terms of her health, and we have committed her life and her health to the hands of God. And I am absolutely sure that He's going to do His will. He's going to prove once again that He's the one that can do the impossible. I ask you, do you believe this? Do you have your heart on this belief that God can do anything and everything just because He loves you? Do you remember? Do you sometimes stop, from the troubles and difficulties and works of daily life and think that if you were the only one sinner in the world, Jesus would have come and died for you, only for you? I question myself, why is it that God does such kind of things for people in favor of people like us? We don't deserve these things, but His love is not to be understood, is to be enjoyed. May the Lord bless all of you. May the powerful hand of God be with all of you. And if there is something that you consider impossible in your life, remember, you have to recognize who you are, to acknowledge who you are dealing with. You are dealing with the one who said, I am the light of the world, the light of the universe, the one who created the earth, the one who saved the earth. May God bless you throughout this Sabbath day. May God bless all the families, all those who are online right now, and all those who could not, for some reason, be connected. But they are, along with us, connected with God. God bless you all. God bless us all. And let's commit our lives once again to the hands of the one who knows everything and who can do anything and everything. Amen.